So the next part I want to go ahead and talk about is the when, and give you guys a little bit better idea of when this happened and how long it actually took place. All right, so let me go ahead and get into that. Now, what you should be seeing around me on this slide essentially is a really simple, really basic timeline. Now, keep in mind, this timeline, does it include all of the major events that happened in this trade? No. All right. So pretty much the reason I put this together is just to give you a general idea of kind of some big major events that took place in this trade to give you a better idea of timing. All right. So speaking of timing and the when, let me go ahead and start with the beginning. Okay. So as far as, well, first off, as far as slavery, keep in mind, when we go back into history, this has been happening for a very long time in different civilizations throughout the world. Okay. And even leading up to this, in Africa itself, slavery was a normal thing. Okay. Typically, if you fought someone, you conquered someone, you would enslave someone. So this was going on. Now, as far as this triangle trade, all right, so the Atlantic slave trade, this is going to happen essentially after the age of exploration. And the reason for that is that now you have different European countries, different European kingdoms that have discovered this new part of the world, and they want to profit from that. All right. So they're going to use the land to profit from that. They're going to use the people. All right. So to talk about that, as far as how the people were used, initially, people from Africa were not brought in as slaves. Instead of that, a lot of times you'd have the conquerors, or in Spain's case, the conquistadors, that would come in. They would conquer the local people and enslave them. Now, two problems with this. First off, when you come to a new area that you haven't been to before, you bring germs and disease, as we know, germs and disease, and you're going to spread it to new people. Now, unfortunately, this happened, and a lot of the local people died. So a lot of people that they were trying to enslave, they died. All right. Another thing that's going to make it hard to enslave these local people is they're local, all right? As in, they know the area, they know the terrain. So as far as actually trying to get away and try to escape, this was much more common in these situations, all right? So of course, the Europeans, the different kingdoms, had a economic problem. They definitely had the opportunity for a profit, for surplus in goods, but unfortunately, they didn't have the workforce to actually do that. This is where we're going to insert the triangle trade. Okay, so as you can see, and I'm looking at the slide, the first event that I put is 1502. The first reported, keep in mind that you would have definitely seen this before this date, but 1502, the first reported African slaves were brought into the New World. So they started bringing these people from Africa through this trade into the New World, and they brought them in abundance. Okay, so we're not talking a few people here and there. As this gets going, it's bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, let me go to the next one, 1640 to 1680. Yeah, large scale introduction of slavery into the Caribbean. And here's the thing, keep in mind, slaves were spread out throughout this whole area, but this was an area where especially they grew sugar cane, all right? Whereas in other areas, typically tobacco, cotton, this was a death sentence. Let me just put it like that. As in, these people would be brought into this area, worked to death, very hard manual labor, and they would be replaced, all right? So once again, people that were brought here in mass, this was a death sentence, all right? I told you it would be depressing. All right, next one, 1794, U.S. Prohibits slave ship building. Now, keep in mind, as time is going to progress, you're going to start seeing people pushing back against this trade, okay? Especially people through different religions that really view this as immoral, all right? Now, of course, the problem with that is you have people on the other side that found ways to justify that this was actually a good and moral thing to do. Unfortunately. All right. So let me move forward and just wrap this up. British Parliament bans the slave trade. The British were the pretty much at this point in history, the main people really running this trade. Now, a lot of countries were doing it, but during this time, especially when it came to naval power, the British were definitely on top. So this was a big deal. 1820, the U.S. makes slave trade piracy punishable by death. And then finally, 1865, Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham Lincoln, slavery is abolished in the United States. But the horrible and the terrifying thing that when looking at this timeline is how long this was allowed to go on. And unfortunately, even though something is made illegal, it is banned, it is abolished, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And even in other countries in the Americas, you still had slavery go on for a while. I mean, a good example of this, I think, I want to say Brazil, and I could be wrong with this, you can double check. I think it wasn't abolished until 1888, all right, a few years after it was in the United States, all right? So something that definitely lasted a long time. Now, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is transition to the next video, and this is going to be, let's see, the what. With this, we're going to talk a little bit more about that middle passage, so you can get a little bit better picture. Okay, so go ahead, click out of this video and go to the next video.